I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the Menendez Brothers. It was the first huge trial on court TV, and now 30 years later, everyone is talking about it again because of a very popular Netflix series and a new Netflix documentary. And now some folks are questioning what happened at those trials. Here's the story. It is one of Court TV's most legendary trials, the Menendez Brothers, Lyle and Eric. In 1989, their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, were murdered. It was a shocking crime scene that looked like a mob hit. Jose and Kitty were shot several times as they sat on their couch eating ice cream and watching a movie. At first, Eric and Lyle were treated as victims, but when their therapist's ex-girlfriend came forward with information that the brothers had confessed during therapy sessions, everything changed. Eventually, the brothers were charged. At trial, they claimed to be the victims of sex abuse and violence. The first juries could not reach a unanimous verdict, and there was a mistrial. But when they were retried, they were convicted and sentenced to life without parole. And now, there is new attention on this case with a hit series on Netflix and now a new documentary on Netflix about the Menendez brothers. As a result, some are calling for the brothers to get out, alleging that the second trial was not fair, and 3 decades behind bars is enough. So a lot of people are now talking about the Menendez brothers. I mean, it's been a while. It's literally been decades since the trial, but there is so much conversation, and a lot of it is about what's happening on Netflix. You had the series Monsters, which is with actors and scripts and everything else, and that has some people riled up about it. But now there's a new documentary, right? So it's not actors, it's the actual people involved in the case, including Lyle and Eric speaking out together. I wanted you to take a look at this. This is the trailer for this new Netflix documentary called The Menendez Brothers.
Everyone asks why we kill our parents. Maybe now people can understand the truth. My name is Eric Menendez. My name is Lyle Menendez, calling you from Donovan Correctional Facility. Lyle was the only person that had ever protected me. What happened that night is very well known, but so much hasn't been told.
If anyone had written this for a script in Hollywood, the Hollywood people would have gone, no way.
The Menendez case is one of the most infamous criminal trials in America. The brothers accused of the murder of their wealthy parents in Beverly Hills.
It was like an incredible soap opera.
Jose was a successful businessman. Kitty was the caring mother. 2 boys, emblematic of wealth and privilege. Why would you kill your parents?
As the prosecutor, I knew it was plain old greed.
It was a media spectacle from the beginning, so we were not the ones who told the story of our life. We looked like the perfect family, but behind the walls, something very wrong was happening.
What did he do to you? Now there's the TikTok movement to free the Menendez.
There's a new generation that's worth the brothers.
People are looking at the case with fresh eyes.
2 kids don't commit this crime for money. And there's people that believe I shouldn't spend the rest of my life in prison.
That judge was determined he was going to get a conviction.
These kids went through some horrible things. I'm telling you now, it's all fake. And if you don't know it's fake, that pisses me off.
There is no evidence saying they're not guilty.
We would much rather lose the murder trial than talk about the 6 secrets of the family.
So now you know the difference, right? This isn't actors, which is fine. You can watch that series. These are the actual brothers telling their story together for the first time, which brings me to my first question of our investigation. which is all about Lyle and Eric. What are the Menendez brothers saying now? What's their story now, 30 years later? Joining me, folks, the director of this new Netflix documentary, The Menendez Brothers, Alejandro Hartmann, is joining us. Alejandro, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
First question, how do you get Eric and Lyle to do this together? And I mean, we've never heard them tell their story together before.
Well, it was a long road, you know, to have both of the brothers. We first started with Lyle. Lyle never talked over the 30 years, I think, since the 90s. He didn't talk, but Eric participated in some documentaries. So he didn't want to talk at the beginning, Eric. But Lyle said yes, maybe because I'm not American. I didn't know the story so well at the beginning, so maybe he liked that. That's what I think. And then I started talking with Lyle for months, literally for months, like 4 or 5 months. And at some point, Lyle himself went to Eric and told him, hey, maybe you should talk to this guy. And he accepted. So at the end, I had both brothers, which was great, which was my goal from the beginning, no?
And that's what makes this a different perspective on this story, which you know what's happening on social media. I mean, everyone is talking about this. We are knee-deep in it here at Court TV, having brought the trial to the world when it first happened years ago, the first trial. I want to do this. I want to play another clip from your documentary. And this is, again, another part of the significant part of the story and the case. Let's take a listen.
When Leslie Abramson called me and asked me to help her because she could not figure out why the crime occurred, my impression initially was that they were two rich kids that just knocked off their parents for the money. But my experience told me there's got to be more to this case. What I found in interviewing Eric was that he was so depressed, so distraught, that I could hardly get any information out of him.
When I first met Dr. Vickery, I saw him as another Dr. O'Neill. I didn't know who to trust, and I had my brother telling me, don't trust any of them. I would much rather lose the murder trial than talk about our past and what had happened.
So what's fascinating here, Alejandro, is understanding what they're saying now and what that dynamic is. I know for years they were separated, and then finally they were in the same prison. How would you describe what they're saying now and the dynamic between Lyle and Eric?
I found a very similar, you know, approach, or they're saying the same things they said, you know, in the 90s. It's very similar. They talk about their innocence. They talk about the abuse. I think they say almost the same things. Of course, they lived through a very, you know, difficult process of being in prison for 30 years. That's not easy, but they say the same things they said in the trial. Mostly, I found that, and the dynamics. I think they are really happy of being together in prison. You know, they've been separated for almost 20 years, and I think in 2018 they got together again. So they are very, you know, they have a very a great link, a great bond between each other. Probably that bond has to do with what happened to them, you know, about the crime, about the abuse, but also they are really good friends. So they look to be very happy being together. But mostly they say the same things, I think.
And how about emotionally? Like, where are they in all this? And did you get a sense that they are holding out hope that they are going to walk out of that prison someday?
They didn't want to talk a lot about that. Of course, I'm not the brothers, you know. I can't talk for them, but I had that feeling that they have some hope. But mostly they didn't want to talk about it, especially Eric. Eric didn't want to create himself, false hopes, false expectations. So I was I tried to respect that, not to insist to talk about that a lot. But I think that, and that's my impression, I think they have some hope, especially after what happened during 2020, where a lot of people was able to watch the trial. A lot of young people found the trial in the Court TV channel and began watching the trial and knowing a different truth. So I think they are completely aware of that.
And the other thing that's changed in society here was the Me Too movement. I mean, the way sexual assault is looked at now, much different than it was in the 90s. A lot of people are talking about that. They're on the inside. Are they cognizant of the way society has changed when it comes to those issues?
Yeah, even though they can't, they don't have, cable TV or they don't have cell phones, but they are really aware of what is happening outside, what is happening in society. Probably, they talk with their wives, they talk with their relatives, so they are pretty aware of what is happening. And also, something that happened, and for me was really, very emotional, was the fact that Lyle began, being some kind, he told me he was like a father confessor, because a lot of men over the years, began talking to him about being sexually assaulted when they were children, So things changed inside the prison too, when they got into prison for the first time in the 90s, probably nobody talked about those issues. And over the years, a lot of people began talking to them because they were pretty famous for that.
Now, you obviously spent a lot of time talking to both of them. So if someone comes up to you and says, Alejandro, how would you describe Lyle?
Well, Lyle, I think the general impression people has about Lyle is in some way right. Lyle is more business-like in some way. He's a leader. He wants to be in control. Not in a bad sense, but he wants to know what is happening. If when he was talking to me, he wanted to know what were we talking about. He's a kind of leader, and that's why probably people inside, inmates go to him to confess or to talk about these difficult issues. On the other side, Eric, it's in some way the opposite. He's more emotional. He's more spiritual. He's very artistic. He draws very well. He paints. So they have pretty different personalities, I would say.
I have time for one more question, Alejandro. Sure. And I want to leave it sort of open-ended to you. What else that you learned or you experienced here has sort of struck you about putting together this documentary?
Well, it was very hard. It was very emotional. I talked with them for months, for like 5 months, on weekly basis and sometimes daily. So sometimes when we talked about those difficult times, killing their parents, but also being sexually molested by their father, it was very emotional and very shocking for me. I was, emotionally drained sometimes, and I learned a lot. But especially what really surprised me had to do with their resilience, with how they were able to, to survive in prison for 30 years. Because probably the first 10 years they were there were very bad, but then they understood how to live in prison and how to try to, to make prison a better place. And both of them, and that's amazing, worked a lot to make prison a better place. And that's in some way enlightening in some way for me, how I never been not even one day in prison. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I don't plan on doing it. Alejandro Hartmann, director of the new Netflix documentary, The Menendez Brothers, thank you so much for sharing some time with us here. We appreciate it, and a lot of folks watching this are going to be watching that documentary. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, coming up next, Will the Menendez brothers get out?
We have been given evidence. We have been given a photocopy of a letter that allegedly was sent by one of the brothers to another family member talking about him being the victim of molestation.
How could live ammunition have made it onto that set?
An A-list actor charged in a fatal shooting on a film set.
Several members of the crew were already upset with the safety conditions.
This was an unspeakable tragedy, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime.
You need to be well aware of what is in this gun.
There is no way for the court to right this wrong.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rollins. Season finale Sunday night, 8/7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
Today, what I want to make very clear, we have not conceded one way or the other. We're not saying that there was anything wrong with the original trial. We have been given evidence. We have been given a photocopy of a letter that allegedly was sent by one of the brothers to another family member talking about him being the victim of molestation. We've also got evidence that was provided by the defense, by his lawyers, that one of the members of the Menudo van alleged that he was molested by the father. None of this information has been confirmed. We are not, at this point, ready to say that we either believe or do not believe that information.
That's the LA DA, George Gascon, saying, we haven't made up our mind about the Menendez brothers, but there's this new evidence. That's all we're saying at this time. But you're holding a press conference, like a very public press conference, that you're now reviewing the Menendez brothers case. To me, that's huge. And knowing the history of this particular district attorney, I think the Menendez brothers have I think they may have a DA that's very willing to listen to their side of the story, which brings me to my next question, which really is a big question, especially for Eric and Lyle. Will the Menendez brothers get out? I need some help with this one. Need to go out to the left coast. Joining me, Deputy Public Defender, LA County, Philip Dubé, and criminal defense attorney, former LA County prosecutor, host of Courtroom Confidential podcast, Josh Ritter. Okay, gentlemen, Philip Dubé. He's got a reputation, this DA. It's a very public press conference. To me, the writing's on the wall. These guys are getting out.
If I were to prognosticate, I would say yes, they are getting out. One of the best things that both of these men could hope for is that their opponent is not contesting the petition. It's so much easier for a judge not to so much surrender the gavel, but to rule in the petitioner's favor when the issues are uncontested. Typically, Vinnie, when we go into court on a habeas matter, the issues are contested. What I think the prosecution should do to make their position even more forceful for the court is to bring their own request to resentence them under California law based on the fact that it would be in the interest of justice and that the original sentence was excessive. And if they can show abuse in their background and that they had an absolutely impeccable prison record, that is grounds to grant the relief. And the court can just resentence them, actually vacate the conviction, find a lesser included or even a lesser related charge, and give them time served and be done with it.
Let me ask you, Josh, what are your thoughts? I think it's going to happen. I'm not saying I necessarily agree that it should happen, but I think it's going to happen. Are you thinking the same thing here, or you have a different take here?
Well, the answer is certainly not 100% no. The DA in his press conference there made that clear. I mean, he was very specific about not being specific about what their feelings were about the case so far. I will say it's interesting that he's making this press conference because they've had this habeas since last year. So they've had a considerable amount of time already to take a look at this evidence if they felt that it was persuasive. But the evidence, if they do feel it's persuasive and they do feel that it was corroborative of the boys' positions that they were being molested at the hands of their father, then yeah, I mean, this DA holds a lot of power and the ability to, as Philip was pointing out, possibly resentence them to manslaughter, which was what they were arguing for in the first trial, in the first case. And if that happens, then they get out. They've got time served. Exactly.
And let me ask you just a quick follow-up, Josh, because you said they've had this for quite some time, but that preceded the Netflix series and the social media explosion that's happening now. Let me ask you a follow-up, and I'll have both of you have a chance for this, so about 15 seconds, 20 seconds or so. Should that impact this, the social media explosion and Netflix making this all of a sudden a cause?
I don't know if it should affect it. I mean, I would hope that the district attorney would be making their decisions based upon the evidence and the law. But I will say that culturally, we have changed a lot since 30 years ago. And our view of abuse, and especially our view of abuse, sexual abuse against men. And so maybe if we're deciding that we're going to take a different look at this than we might have 30 years ago, that might be the lens in which they're looking at it now.
Philip Dubé, 10 seconds.
Absolutely, because the film highlighted much of the injustice during the retrial. The court shifted gears, went in reverse, and absolutely reversed itself on the imperfect self-defense and shut it down when there was no change in the evidence. People don't like that.
All right, we've got a lot more to get to. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the Menendez brothers. They did kill their parents, you know. They were convicted of double murder, and they were sentenced to life without parole. But now, you know, I know, there's a growing movement to set the brothers free. Here's their story. The Menendez Brothers trial was one of the most divisive in court TV history. The story of two rich young men, Eric and Lyle Menendez, growing up in the lavish suburbs of New Jersey and Beverly Hills. Their dad was a record executive. They seemed to have life on a silver platter, but behind closed doors, things were bad. The brothers took a shotgun and killed their mother and father. Then they covered it up and lied about where they were. They spent tens of thousands of dollars in the months that followed until they were arrested and charged with murder. Then came the trial where they testified about years of physical and sexual abuse by their father. Everyone had an opinion. The public was split, and so were the juries. Then, at a second trial, they were convicted and sentenced to life. Now, it's once again on the national agenda. And again, everyone has an opinion about whether or not justice was served. The trial of Eric and Lyle Menendez was unusual in so many ways. And it really begins with, you know, how people saw the evidence. It broke on gender lines. People were watching the same thing. Men saw one thing and women were seeing something else as we watched and we listened. There were some other unusual moments, which is the therapist who was treating the boys, testifying in their trial. Take a look.
And we headed back to the office, and right before we entered the front door of the office building in which I had my office, he leaned back against, as I recall, a parking meter that was in front of the office door and said, "We did it." I don't know if he said we killed our parents, but I asked him, you mean you killed your parents? He said yes. And from that point, we went back up into the office.
This brings me to my next question in this investigation. It's about what you just saw. I mean, this is their therapist. Why was a therapist allowed to testify about a confession? Isn't there some sort of privilege there? Like you're going to your psychologist, your psychiatrist, your therapist, you're telling him your most innermost thoughts. Why is he on the stand testifying about a confession? Joining me, Deputy Public Defender, LA County, Philip Dubé, and criminal defense attorney, former LA County prosecutor, host of Courtroom Confidential podcast, Josh Ritter. Philip Dubé, what's going on? Why? Why is a therapist allowed to testify about a confession to a murder here?
In most circumstances, conversations with your therapist are confidential and they are inadmissible in judicial proceedings under what we call the psychotherapist-patient privilege. However, like everything else in the law, Vinnie, and I'm sure Joshua will agree, there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions is what's called the dangerous patient exception, meaning if a psychotherapist has reasonable cause to believe that he or she and or others are put in danger by their own patient, they can break privilege. And when the lover overheard what was going on and he told the lover what was going on and shared what happened with his wife, Laurel, the doctor, the lover went to the police and they got a search warrant. And the doctor, bless his heart, actually asserted the privilege at trial and felt he had to remain loyal to them. But the court basically overruled it and found that under the dangerous patient exception to the psychotherapist-patient privilege rule, the statements were coming in. Now, not in their totality. Some of them were excluded. And when those statements came in, they were devastating to the defense. Absolutely devastating.
No, of course. Let's take a listen because there's also recordings of some of the conversations. Let's take a listen.
And I still think Mom was a suicide because, I feel that in her letters to Eric and I, she gave me the permission, and it's burdensome to continually be handed to me. Eric handed me it to talk to Mom. His dad handed a lot of things to me. She had given me permission to please carry out her suicide, and that it was obvious that she had decided in her mind she wants to die. She can't do it. And she doesn't want to talk about it. And there's nothing that I can do to help her. There's nothing anyone else can do. And she very much doesn't want anyone else to know that what Eric and I did took courage beyond belief, beyond strength. There was no way I was going to make a decision to kill my mother without Eric's consent. I didn't even want to influence him in that issue. I just let him sleep on it in a couple of days. Because I'm in a very good position to influence Eric on a lot of things. Because he knows that I care, and a whole number of issues that I can talk eloquently and whatever. And but when it came to that issue, I wanted nothing to do with it. It had to be his own personal issue. He felt the same way I did about killing Mom. And I feel angry toward my relatives. Why didn't you do something when you knew what was going on and I didn't? And now when I found out, I did something about it. I did what I thought my mother would want me to do, which is please kill me, and I can't. And I just couldn't just kill my mom, and that would be ridiculous. I wanted to get rid of the source, but I couldn't live with that. Nobody could.
Okay. Josh Ritter, how unusual is it? Like what happened during this trial where you've got the therapist testifying, where you're hearing like recordings of the sessions?
Oh, it's nearly unheard of. I mean, you just don't see this happen. As Philip pointed out really well, this is a privilege that's incredibly important. We want patients to be able to freely share information with their therapists. And this was litigated over a couple of years. This became a crucial part of this entire case, whether or not those tapes and the confessions that they made to their doctor would actually come in. So this wasn't an easy decision by the courts. It was heavily litigated by both sides, and it changed the entire dynamic of the case. I mean, there's an argument to be made that had it not been for those confessions, the prosecution case would not be nearly as strong as it was, and it may have changed the way that the boys handled their own defense.
Yeah, you wouldn't, the defense would be very different. It might be, hey, you just don't have any evidence that we actually committed the murders, which they did. I mean, we know they did it, but did you have the evidence to do it? Philip Dubé, looking back on it now, right? We're looking back 30 years. Is that part of the equation in the fairness of this? The fact that a therapist provides the information that prosecutors needed, the direct evidence, the confessions, in order to convict the brothers of this double murder?
No, to be quite honest with you. I found the rationale from the state Supreme Court to be very disingenuous, but I think what really did them in is the fact that the trial court shut down their defense on retrial.
Oh, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that, Philip. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. Yeah. Let me play another piece of the recordings really quickly, because this is so unusual, so different, and one of the reasons why I think people are looking back at the case.
She was very cold. My mother was always very good in special situations. Very calm. This was obviously something that was extreme stress for her. You know, if Bethany walked in the room when she was crying, or when I did, frequently, she would stop crying. I won't talk about it. It's my own problem. Blah, blah, blah. She wouldn't let you in though. No, very matter of fact also about stressful things, which would mean if I started saying, which I would do would be to try to get her emotional and get her emotions out. Hey, you know, I'm with you. I think we should leave Dad. He's crazy. He's doing this and this to you. It's obvious. He's doing this to me. Her reaction is, you know, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I think you're overreacting, Lyle. Here's all the recent things that Lyle, he bought you this car. He really wanted you to do this. He wanted to do that. He's a loving father. I don't know what you're talking about. I think we should stop talking about it. How angry with her? What? How angry with her? Oh, extremely angry with me, because she was putting me in a position to defend the things that my father was doing to me, and that wasn't even supposed to be the issue. It was the things that I had to get past first, the things he was doing to me, to get to the things he was doing to her, and there was just no way.
So, Josh, I understand the concept of a patient is with a therapist and is planning a horrific murder, and the therapist takes action to prevent something from happening. Here, it's already happened. This is almost like, you know, you go to your criminal defense attorney and tell him what happened, and all of a sudden the criminal defense attorney's testifying against you.
And I tell you what, your criminal defense attorney would take whatever you said to them to the grave. I mean, there's no way your criminal defense attorney would be turning on a tape recorder to hear you talk about what crimes you may have taken part in. So it's, we're really in uncharted territory here. The fact that, one, you had the therapist testifying, two, that he actually recorded it. But again, there was this, the courts took a look at this, and they felt that there were threats made to the therapist by Lyle that was an exception, as was pointed out, we talked about earlier, that if there's a danger of, you're right, not past danger, but
the future danger,
potential danger, then there can't be an exception, and they allowed all of this in. It's incredibly controversial even to this day.
All right, Philip Dubé, get ready, because still to come, why wasn't the evidence of sexual abuse allowed in the second trial?
He became more serious and indicated to me that he was afraid of not sleeping downstairs.
Why?
Because he and his dad had been touching each other, and he indicated that it was in his genital area.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours, on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV.
What happened that night? Are you not prepared to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer, a Court TV original series. Premieres October 20th, only on Court TV.
Between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
started with, after sports practices, he would massage me. And we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
My dad came in and told me to take off my clothes and to kneel on the bed, and he closed the blinds and he put the slide underneath the door like he always did, and he told me to bend over the footboard.
The Menendez Brothers trial, the first one, the one that Court TV brought to America, I mean, that's what it was about. That's what the conversation was about throughout this case. It was about the sex abuse of Eric and Lyle, the allegations that were making. Do you believe them? Do you not believe them? And if you believe them, what does it mean? But it wasn't just their testimony. They also had testimony from their cousin. Take a listen.
Lyle, Eric, and I had been downstairs playing ping pong. And the two boys were called upstairs to get ready for bed.
Who called them upstairs?
Jose.
And what happened next?
I stayed and went into my bedroom, which was downstairs.
Is that in the basement?
Yes.
Okay.
And a while later, Lyle came down. I believed he was there to tell me goodnight. And he came downstairs and he started asking if he could spend the night in the other bed. We had two twin beds, and Kathy had left by then.
So there was an empty bed?
Right.
Okay, so he's asking if he can spend the night in the bed. And what do you do?
Right, I did not, I pretty much ignored him and brushed him off at first. I thought he was just goofing around.
He's an 8-year-old kid, and you didn't take it seriously?
Right.
Okay. And what happened after that?
He became more serious and indicated to me that he was afraid of not sleeping downstairs.
Why?
Because he and his dad had been touching each other, and he indicated that it was in his genital area.
Did he seem like he was kidding around, or did he seem serious?
No, he was serious.
And what did you do?
I went and got Kitty and brought her downstairs and told her what was going on.
You took it seriously enough to go get Kitty then?
Yes.
Overruled.
Yes, I did.
And did you tell Kitty what Lyle had told you?
Yes, I told her what he had indicated to me, what he was telling me, what he was showing me.
How did she look? Did she look shocked, or did she show any emotion?
She showed that she did not believe me.
This was the first trial. This was what that trial was about. But then came the second trial, and suddenly things were much different. All of this evidence wasn't there. Neither were the cameras and microphones, folks, so you didn't get to see it. And that brings me to my next question, which is, why wasn't the evidence of the sexual abuse allowed in the second trial? It's like it's the same case, it's the same defendants, it's the same accusations, but the evidence is different? Why? Still with me, Philip Dubé and Josh Ritter. Philip, I know you're chomping at the bit.
Mm-hmm. In the first trial, they had two juries because they were afraid of the impact of cross-admissible evidence against both brothers. So they wanted separate juries to decide each boy's fate at the time. But when they hung, right around that time, the O.J. Simpson verdict came back, and of course it was a not guilty, and it was sort of a black eye on the DA's office at the time. And I think they were shocked that in a major media case, they lost. At the time, Judge Stanley Weisberg, who presided over the Menendez trial, he had only been on the bench maybe a couple of years. He had been appointed right out of the DA's office. He was a former prosecutor. So I think he was tightening the screws, if you will, and shut it down. The initial defense, all the rulings were not binding on the retrial, and the court absolutely had jurisdiction to reverse course and only allow in what it found to be legally relevant opponent, and the court made a finding that all the sex abuse and molestation evidence was legally irrelevant during the retrial, and the only way the court would reconsider allowing it in is if Lyle took the stand. So in other words, conditioned admissibility of their defense. And basically, they weren't saying they were not guilty, Vinnie. They weren't saying set me free. What they were saying, we acted in unreasonable self-defense, and we were guilty of voluntary manslaughter by firearm, which back then would top out at 11 years per victim with an additional 2 years for the firearm. So they would have been out conceivably in 26 years, or 85% of that. But the judge shut it down. And the problem was, between the time of the first trial and the retrial, Lyle allegedly made some inculpatory statements to the press and to other people while in jail, and those statements were coming in that the court felt would belie that defense. So rather than trifle, if you will, the judge conditioned admissibility on Lyle taking the stand.
Let me ask you, Josh Ritter, former prosecutor, now criminal defense attorney, was that a fair trial? The second trial, if the evidence is different, what the defense is able to put out there, and the issue that became the focal point and sort of the dividing point on the way people saw the case, including the first two juries?
That's a difficult question. I will say this. I think there was significant evidence of abuse. I think that if you watch the first trial, there were many people who testified to corroborate the boys' allegations of abuse. Now, as Philip pointed out, though, what that really was asking for is not an acquittal. What they were asking for was an instruction on perfect self-defense, meaning were they in an honest fear for their lives, but it was unreasonable, meaning that they wouldn't go free. They would just go from first-degree murder, making them eligible for the death penalty, by the way, down to a manslaughter, making it possible for them to ever see the outside of a prison again. That was the argument they had always made, even in the first trial. In the second trial, because of those judges, the judges' decisions, that option was never even presented to the jury. They only had the option between first-degree murder or walk them out the door as free men. And I think presented with the evidence that they had at the second trial, the jury really felt like they had no choice.
Yeah, with just all or nothing, Philip Dubé, it's much different, because I've spoken with one of the jurors, and they said they weren't divided on not guilty. They were divided between the first degree and the manslaughter. So you take the manslaughter out, you're not going to set these kids free.
No, of course not. And I think the judge was absolutely wrong. The judge should have let it in, always err on the side and allow in their defense. And obviously, in hindsight, I'm sure counsel wonders whether or not they should have put Lyle on the stand. We'll never know the answer to that. And frankly, even if he would have testified, we don't know if the verdict would have been any different. However, this may be factored in at the habeas hearing. All of this. You know, had this have come in the first time, and with all the new evidence, would it be now in the interest of justice, based on this new evidence that wasn't available back then, to give them a new trial or to set them
Absolutely.
free? And
you know we're out of time. That's the only time I would ever interrupt Philip Dubé. Philip Dubé, Josh Ritter, thank you both so much. You know, this story, more than most, demonstrates the absolute need for cameras inside the courtroom. The Menendez Brothers' first trial had cameras. The public saw the trial, and the public understood why the juries were deadlocked. But no one saw the second trial, except the people who walked into the courtroom. And now many are questioning whether justice was served. The only way to gain trust is to be transparent. And in that respect, the judge failed the public. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.